Hope you're alright out there. So I thought I'd take a look at the band Heart today with the great Wilson sisters. First got into this band back in '85, and then was able to kind of, from there go back into their back catalogue and sort of take it from there. So their first album is this, and it's 1976's Dreamboat Annie. I used to actually have this on vinyl reissue on a single sleeve when they got big in the 80s, and then I actually found a gatefold copy on the original label. It was Mushroom Records, and so I replaced it with that, but then I sold on my vinyl. This is basically, they play around the Seattle scene. They're called Little Led Zeppelin because they do a lot of Zepp covers. Back in the early 70s, they go over to Vancouver to avoid the draft because the boyfriend Ann Wilson is with, Mike Fisher, has been drafted or could get drafted. So they're playing around the Vancouver area. So sometimes it says that the Canadian, I think, is often a kind of a misnomer, but they're from Seattle. They're the first great Seattle band after Hendrix, of course, who's from Seattle. And then another great one's Queensryche. There's those other bands, but I'm not into that. So what's this album? I think it's a great record. This, I was thinking about it before. They're actually quite dated Heart at this point. That's what's quite interesting about them. There's a sort of slightly hippie, folksy element to this that you'd probably find more in the early 70s. And when you read interviews with the Wilson sisters, I think they're quite into that counterculture thing. And I think it comes out in the music, so it's compared to if you're compared to, say, the Boston's debut album, or what Blue Oyster Cult are doing, or Styx, or Kansas, that they feel more in the sort of, cutting edge at the moment. Certainly the Boston debut album, that's right on the cutting edge. Whereas this, it's kind of, it's kind of, in sound and style, it's sort of a few years behind. But I love it, it's a classic. It did, it's double platinum for them. It was a huge success. Let's just go through the tracks. So I think the thing with Heart is the rock band. They appeal to bands who are into heavy music, but they're not very heavy. There's not much distortion on this. But the songs are great. It starts off with Magic Man. That's a song about Ann Wilson's lover. He was the Magic Man. He obviously knew the tricks. But anyway, it's a great track. It's a classic. It's always played on classic rock radio. Love it. Great guitar on it, great little synth break, and Anne's vocals, just brilliant. And we'll talk more about Anne in a bit. Then you've got Dreamboat Annie. So there's 3 Dreamboat Annies on this. There's Dreamboat Annie Fantasy Child, the actual track Dreamboat Annie, then Dreamboat Annie Reprise. So they're all basically the same song but played in different ways. And it's a lovely little tune. Again, it brings the acoustic guitar to the fore. And that's something where Nancy Wilson comes to the fore, not only a backing singer, but she's a fantastic acoustic guitar player. Then there's got another classic, Crazy on You. Again, that's got a great acoustic guitar intro. Big hit for them. Then one of my favourite tracks, a sort of deep cut, The Soul of the Sea. Again, quite an unusual track. Don't know what the lyrics about, but it's pretty cool. So that was side one. In actual fact, if you look on here on the CD on the back, you can see how the heart in the middle is kind of subdivided into side 1 and 2. Then Rocker opens side 2, White Lightning and Rhine. That's good. Love Me Like Music, I'll Be Your Song. It's interesting. It's kind of like a kind of ballad. It's unusual. Almost. I don't know. It's almost kind of like the song you get on a film soundtrack or something. There's something quite sort of cinematic, like I said, they're a rock band, but they don't sound like other rock bands, Then Sing Child Sing, which is a kind of funky track. It's quite daft, but quite like it. Then a beautiful track at number 9, How Deep It Goes. Love that. Again, it's got lush orchestrations. It's not a sort of song that a typical rock band would do. It's quite a weird mix, this album. It's a mixture of ballads, acoustic, and then it's only really got like three rockers on it, but it's a really top debut album, and it did amazing for the band. It's where that classic Heart, our logo, comes from. Controversy there, a record company, they wanted them bare shoulder on the front, the Wilson sisters, and then there was an article where a PR guy at the company inferred a lesbian incestuous relationship between the sisters to basically get notoriety for the band, and obviously Anne and Nancy hated that, and that gave rise to this album, and also probably their most famous track. So that's Little Queen. So this is more polished, this album, more settled. Howard Lees is more involved now as a full member on synthesizer and second guitar. Just say that on drums is Michael DeRosier, Steve Fossen on bass, and Roger Fisher on guitar. You don't tend to hear about these guys much, obviously as the Heart story's gone on, but these guys, they were the original members. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but they're part of the classic Heart sound. So this album opens with Barracuda, and that's basically a lyrical retort to the sexism of the music industry, and obviously what happened on the Dreamboat Annie album. Obviously, there's a lot of misogyny in the music industry, and a lot of things probably now are still to come out about what went on back then, and the treatment of women, obviously, post Me Too. So the song Barracuda is kind of probably getting more important lyrically as it goes along. It's a fantastic track. It's got a great gallop like Achilles' Last Stand. Amazing vocal from Anne, one of the all-time great rock vocals. Crunching guitars from Roger and Nancy, just great. Then you got Love Alive, which is again something they do so well. It's more of a Zeppelin-y acoustic track. It's beautiful, love it. Then they basically rip off Battle of Evermore by Zeppelin, but I think it's much better. Dream of the Archer. So it starts off with Sylvan's Song, which is a mandolin instrumental, and it segues into Dream of the Archer, which is just, if you want to be taken off into a magical world of fair maidens and knights, it's superb. It's just really magical for me. Then it finishes off with a top rocker called Kick It Out, and it's a really cool lyric. That it's basically about a young girl who's just kind of causing trouble in her town because she just wants to break out of the stage thing. So again, Anne capturing that really well with the lyrics. So side one's really top. Side two opens with Little Queen, that's quite a funky track. It's another really cool album track. Then there's Treat Me Well, Say Hello. These are less successful. Treat Me Well's got a nice Nancy lead vocal. People forget Nancy's a great singer. The difference with Nancy, she's just got a softer voice, not as ballsy as Anne, but they harmonise amazingly well together. Then it finishes off with Cry to Me and Go On Cry, which is kind of work together. I like Cry to Me. So yeah, side two's not as good on this album, but it's a top record. Probably prefer Dreamboat Annie, but this has got the first 4 tracks on this are absolutely corking. So I had those on vinyl when I was younger. My sort of initial perception of those was that I liked them, but I was kind of into the 80s stuff. As I've got older and more 70s in my taste, I wouldn't say I prefer the 70s stuff. I like them both equally. We'll come to the 80s stuff. So basically they had a disagreement with their original label. They recorded this album, I think, or some of it. So that old record label put this out pretty much shortly after Little Queen, which is Magazine. And again, that's using the classic Heart logo. I really need to get a better pressing of this. It's some cheapy thing, there's some crap fucking phone number in there. Anyway, I really like this album. It tails off because it has a couple of live tracks which I'm not fussed with, but it opens with a track called Heartless, which we'll get another version of later. You got Devil Delight, a song called Just the Wine. I used to love playing that acoustic part on my guitar. One of the first sort of acoustic things I probably learned. Then they do a cover of Harry Nilsson's Without You, and obviously if one singer's going to pull that off majestically, it's Ann Wilson. She doesn't do all the histrionics like people like Mariah Carey do. Then Magazine, the title track's great. It's quite Elton John-ish. It's almost got a little conceptual sort of theme bit in the middle. Really like it. Then Here Song, which is a little Nancy acoustic sort of pretty thing, which I love. Then it finishes off with Mother Earth Blues and I've Got the Music in Me. They seem to be live tracks from some show. So it's kind of, the album's kind of not a proper album. But those the first 6 tracks are really good. So then it comes to the proper album again from '78, and this is their classic. This is the album I'd pick as their, you know, if there's one Heart album to get for me, it's this one. It's 1978's Dog and Butterfly. So basically, the album's split into two sides. Obviously, albums were then. Side one's the dog. Side two's the butterfly. So side one's got all the rockier tracks on. Side two's got the sort of more acoustic tracks. So opens with a Cut with Fire, which seems to be a live track. So it's a good rocker. Don't think it's great opener, but it's good. Then it's got High Time, which is a really, really good kind of poppy, up-tempo rock track. Something the band hasn't done up until this point. Really good. Then there's Hijinks, which is kind of a weird little riff. Again, I quite like that track. Not as into it as the other ones. And it finishes off with a real Cart classic straight on. Quite a funky feel on this. Great harmony vocals. And I should say that none of these tracks have a lot of distortion. They, you know, Heart are a rock band, but it's strange, isn't it? Like, as if you're into hard rock or metal, you know, Heart will be drawn into your orbit. But, you know, you could argue at times, you know, they're no heavier than, say, the Eagles or a band like that. You know, but it's great stuff. So side two's where things really, to me, kick off. I think side two's their masterpiece. You've got the title track Dog and Butterfly. It's a beautiful acoustic track with beautiful lyrics, and then Lighter Touch, which is a kind of almost quite autumnal mystical ballad, I would describe it. And it builds to this like really epic end with lush strings, and I love the way it kind of, these tracks take you away. They take you somewhere else. They take you out of your environment, you know. Next track, Nada One, love it. Awesome acoustic guitar on this by Nancy. She's using great voicings, and it builds up. Again, the string arrangements on this, brilliant. And then finally the album finishes with Mistral Wind, and this is Heart's all-time track for me, even more so than Barracuda. It's basically a Zeppelin-esque epic. Starts off with a plaintive acoustic guitar riff, but very unusual riff, slightly kind of atonal by Nancy, but really good. And then it just builds. Basically, it's about a mariner or someone who's lost at sea, and then a wind, mystical wind, the Mistral Wind's coming, and it's kind of taking them to where they need to be, I guess. But I just love it. It's that thing, you put headphones on, it just takes you on a journey. Anne's vocals soar, and I just love the way it just builds, and then it just drops down. It's got lovely waves, and it's almost like it returns to calm. Yeah, it's you know, that it's worth just having this album just for that. This bonus album, this album's got bonus tracks on. And it's got Heartless, a version of Heartless, which I think is better than the magazine version from a BBC live concert. So in some ways that kind of completes the first part of the Heart era. After this, Roger Fisher, who was in a relationship with Nancy Wilson, basically they split up and he gets given the boot. And I think there's always been a little bit of bitterness there, because it's kind of like as much his band as it was theirs in a way, but they kind of took control. So then they've got to kind of navigate their way into the 80s. Then you get the Bebe Le Strange album. I didn't used to like this album that much when I was younger. I actually bought this on vinyl at Shades Records in London when I was a kid. We got a trip down to London for a computer trip. I wasn't studying computing, but I went down with my mates and we went to Shades, and I bought this on import along with another album, Passionworks. Actually, the Dog and Butterfly used to have that on gatefold vinyl. That was pretty cool, gatefold. But anyway, this album's good. It's a bit more stripped down. Roger Fisher's not there, so Howard Lees steps in more on guitar duties. The title track's great, Bebe Le Strange. Then you got Down on Me, which is a good bluesy track. Then Nancy does a lovely Silver Wheels, which is a lovely little acoustic instrumental. It shows her skill as an acoustic fingerstyle guitarist. Next track, Break. I don't like that at all. It's kind of a punky rocker, but it just doesn't suit the band. Then Rockin' Heaven Down, that's good. Side Terms of Even It Up, that's one of their all-time sort of heart rockers, really good. Then you got Strange Now, which I don't like. Then Raised on You, I like that, really nice groove. And then a really unusual track of Pilot, which is, I can't really describe it, but it's just got a really cool feel to it. Then it finishes with Sweet Darling, which is like a beautiful piano ballad with a great Anne vocal. So that's a kind of, they're in an interim phase. That album still goes gold. Heart have been a platinum act up to this point. I've had double and single platinum albums in America, and they've got a good following in the UK. The next two albums I don't have. I did used to have them on vinyl. Private Audition's the next one. That's when they first came to my attention when I was a kid because we were in Kerrang, but I can't really get away with that album. It doesn't do very well for the band. The next album, Passionworks, is worth checking out. I did have that on vinyl. And a CD, but the mastering wasn't great, but maybe if it gets reissued I might get that. It's got a couple of key tracks on the Passionworks album. There's How Can I Refuse, which is a really good rocker, but I think it's where the band shows where the band's going to go in the mid-80s when they're doing it on rocky tracks. Rocky. And then the other tune is this track called Allies by Jonathan Cain. So it's written by Jonathan Cain, A Journey, but what's key here is they've used an outside writer. It's a really good power ballad, and that will influence things moving forward. When I saw them live on the Bad Animals tour, they did How Can I Refuse, and I hadn't heard the track before, and I was like, oh, that's amazing, you know. But there's a lot of good tracks on this album. There's Johnny Moon and Language of Love and Sleep Alone, you know. There's various tracks. Keith Olsen produces it, and they actually re-recorded some of these for their Broken Beautiful album, which is our last album. But anyway, the album doesn't do that well. They're basically in trouble. They lose the deal, and then their Capitol Records, EMI, come in for them, but it's like, look, we need hits, so we need to use outside writers, and they make 1985's Heart album. So on this album, 6 of the tracks I think are by outside writers, the other 4 are written by the band. As you can see here, I've got a crappy double CD thing. For love or money, you can't get a remaster of the Heart album, which is strange because it sold 5 million copies in the US alone. But I first came to my attention, I was watching a show called Entertainment USA back on BBC Two, and then they had a video for What About Love. I love the track, amongst other things. And I was like, I must get that album. So, trivia fact, in Kendal, near where I'm from, there was a hi-fi shop called Kenneth Gardner, and they used to sell hi-fi and had a small vinyl collection. And Kenneth Gardner also had a branch in Lancaster, which is another city near to where I was brought up. So I went to Kenneth Gardner in Lancaster and I bought Heart for the principal sum of £5.49. And I always loved the record. In spite of the outside writers, their songs are so good. It opens with If Looks Could Kill, one of the all-time Heart classics. Brilliant. What About Love? Amazing. Never. Amazing. Then These Dreams, with brilliant lyrics by Bernie Taupin on that. And then side 1 finished with The Wolf, which was like a rocker written by the band, and it's a really cool track. Side 2, less successful, but All Eyes, it's an okay track, but Nobody's Home, a ballad I've always really liked. That's got a great solo by Frankie Sullivan of Survivor on it. I have to mind the solo, sorry. Then Nothing at All, which is another great pop track, was number 1. I don't know if that was number 1, but it was top 10. I should just say, I think What About Love was a number 1 in America. Or was it? I'm not sure. No, the top 10. What About Love and Never were top 10. These Dreams was number 1, and Nothing at All was top 10. Then it's got What He Don't Know, which is quite a good little sort of acoustic track, pop track. I think that's written by the band. And then Shell Shock's another rocker written by the band. There's actually a really good Howard Lee's guitar solo at the end of this. So Howard Lee really steps up to the fore and does some incisive lead breaks. So the weird thing with this album is it's never been remastered, and there's different mixes. The mix I have of Looks Could Kill, the mix I have of If Looks Could Kill on this and Never is different to the version on my other album, and the Never is different to the one I saw on the Entertainment USA video. I also saw that as well as What About Love. It had more guitar. Nothing at All seems to be a different mix, different vocal. So what we need is a remaster with the original album and the additional mixes. But if you get this album, The Essential Heart, this is properly remastered, and those classic tracks, classic hits off the Heart album and Bad Animals are remastered, and they sound really good, really punchy. It's actually worth getting this. It's a good compilation. The mastering's good, and it's a good one-stop shop. So on this, I've also got the Bad Animals album. So the Heart album sells 5 million copies in America, totally re-establishes them bigger than ever. Then they make Bad Animals, that sells 3 million in America, but from our point of view, it establishes them in the UK once and for all because they have a massive hit with the track Alone. So Alone's the classic piano ballad with one of the all-time great vocal performances. Basically, whenever people do it on American Idol, they always fucking tank it because they can't do Anne's massive note. So it's probably worth at this point sort of contextualising Ann Wilson. The typical narrative is Ann Wilson's one of the greatest female rock singers ever. There's no point in talking about it that way. She's just one of the greatest rock singers ever. She just happens to be female. But in terms of, of other female singers, people are always ready to big up people. I feel she doesn't get brought into the mix. People will talk about Annie Lennox in this country, quite rightly so, or sort of great folks like Alison Moyet, pop geniuses of the past like Dusty Springfield, and I did a thing on ABBA, the ABBA women, superb. You get modern singers, which modern pop singers I'm not as into, but I think Ann Wilson's just right up there. She's absolutely superb. She's so good that her sister doesn't always get a good licking, and she's no slouch. So I don't like the Bad Animals album anyway, going back to it, as much as the Heart album. It's probably my least favourite of this era of Heart. There's basically 4 albums in that outside songwriter, Big Hair era. But Who Will You Run To Alone are really good. They're great tracks. There's the Girls, good. Then you got I Want You So Bad, that's alright. Then Wait For An Answer, that's really good, epic sort of keyboard song with a soaring vocal by Anne. Side 2 opened with the Rock of Bad Animals. They opened live with that when I saw them on this tour. So that's really good. I can't remember who supported them. You Ain't So Tough, Strange in the Heart, they're a bit, no, not great. But album finishes with 2 tracks I really like. There's Easy Target, which is a kind of poppy track, poppy rock track, which I like with a cool riff. And then RSPV, that's an interesting track. It's written by the band, but it's kind of getting back to early Heart. You've got the acoustic guitar going, great harmony vocals. So yeah, the Heart album, I would give, 8, 9 out of 10. Bad Animals, I'd probably be a 6 or a 7. So the next album they did was, I should just say actually Ron Neverson produced the Heart album and the Bad Animals album. It was a big part of their success. He did a superb job, the great Ron Neverson. They get Richie Zito in to produce this. So Richie Zito produced Bad English's album. I think he did Ty Ketto's Main Attraction by White Lines. So he was doing a few things at that time. So this is the Brigade album. I just get the first problem out of the way. There's too many tracks on this typical CD era album. It's got 13 tracks. But I think it's a much better album than Bad Animals. Opens with a Rocker Wild Child. I really like this track. It's great. It's a lot more guitars on this album. It's a heavier album than Heart or Bad Animals. Then All I Want to Do Is Make Love to You. Did Mutt Lang write that? I don't know. Interesting lyric. I like that tune. Secret. Yeah, Secret's kind of the hit single off this that people forget. I think it's really, really good track. Brilliant vocal, really good. Then it's got another rocker with some cool sax on Tall Dark Hampton Stranger. I like that. Just have a cup of tea. I'm starting to get very hoarse. Have a bit more, sorry. And then I Didn't Want to Need You. That's another really good ballad. So some of these have outside writers, some don't. The band writes a little more on this album. But then you go to the last track on side 1 was The Night, which is a kind of Zeppelin-ish rocker. In actual fact, looking at it, that's a really strong side 1. It's more rocky. You've got ballads, you've got great vocals, production's good. Very good. Then side 2 opens with one of my favourite tracks now, Falling From Grace. Again, the acoustic guitar coming out. A little bit of the classic Heart with the new sort of pop rock sound, really like it. And then a lovely track, Under the Sky. Again, it's a sort of poppy acoustic track. It's got lovely harmony vocals with Anne and Nancy on that, and really good. So now, yeah, we've pretty much not dropped the ball yet. Then you got Cruel Nights. That's a pretty good track actually. It's a good radio rocker, not great. Stranded's the next one. This is Nancy doing a lead vocal, so it's a bit like Strangers of the Heart. I quite like it. Don't leave me like this. It's got a catchy chorus, and Nancy, when she sings things, she's got a bit more vulnerability than Anne, so it's got that more neediness. You know, so if you're a bloke, you're like, yeah, I'll help you, Nancy. Then Call of the Wild, which is a sort of Zeppelinist rocker. Yeah, I'm not as into that. And then the next track I really like, it's a sort of pop track, poppy rock track with a vocal by Nancy. I want the world to turn. I want your world to turn. But I really like her. Nancy does a great vocal on this, and the final chorus, she puts in a really punchy delivery. And then it finishes with I Love You. I never used to like this track, but I do now. It's a really nice Beatles-esque ballad. So yeah, you could probably, you know, if you just chopped one or two tracks off this, it'd be an absolutely corking album. This, I do think it's very good. The longer I go on and going through the tracks there, it's probably a good 8 out of 10. But it's a lot better than Bad Animals for me. So then there's a bit of a gap. Heart of Felly hammered it, 85, 87, 93, 1990. They released a live album. They've got big all over the world for the first time in their career, really. And they've had a second act. So at the end of that second act, this comes out in 93, Desire Walks On. Now I got this on vinyl at the time, and I actually remember listening to them at my auntie's. My brother got it for me, and I didn't know much about the album, but basically, obviously, it's coming out at a difficult time for this kind of music, because obviously music's changed in the era from 1990 to 93. It's completely changed. What I think is interesting is Heart have a degree of credibility. Lane Staley sings on this album. The Seattle band, they obviously have a huge respect for the Wilson sisters. They obviously like classic early Heart. So they become friends with like Jerry Cantrell, and Wilson's like friends with Jerry Cantrell, Lane Staley, I think Chris Cornell, possibly the Pearl Jam guys. You know, they're all in that Seattle community, and Heart are part of that as the elder stage women. So Howard Lees is still in the band, and Denny Carmassi. I've not mentioned Denny Carmassi's been in the band going back to the early 80s. He's the great Montrose drummer. And they've got a guy called Mark Andes on bass in that period, who was in a band called Firefall, I think. They were quite popular. I don't think Mark Andes on this. John Purdell and Dwayne Barron produced this, so they did Ozzy's No More Tears album, and they later did Awake by Dream Theater. So I think this album benefits from that. It's got some rockier songs, but what comes back on this album is that 70s heart. There's some less outside writers, and they're getting the mojo about the writing, and it really shows. Again, there's probably a bit too many tracks on it, but it opens with Desire, short piece, and then you got Back on Black, which is basically a really good rocker. It's Barracuda Part 2. It's got the Barracuda Gallop, but it's really good. Then there's Back to Avalon, which is a really nice folksy sort of acoustic one, with a big pop chorus. It's excellent. Track 4's The Woman in Me. That's like a synth ballad. I suppose you'd say it's a little bit like Waiting for a Girl Like You, sort of vibe by Foreigner, but it's the lyric perspective is totally different. But I like it. It's a good track. Then Rage, there's a track called Rage, which is kind of a Beatles Zeppelin mashup, but it's really heavy. And like Anne's vocal on this is absolutely storming, really good. Then there's In Walks the Night, which is a big AOR track. I really like it. It's kind of the greatest hits of Heart, this album, it's kind of 70s, 80s, early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, Then My Crazy Head, I can't remember if that finished side 1. I think actually side 1 finished with Ring Them Bells. But anyway, My Crazy Head, I love this. It's got a lovely uplifting chorus, brilliant. Then they do a cover of Ring Them Bells by Bob Dylan. Really good. Anne and Nancy both said vocals on this, but perhaps more importantly, Lane Staley does as well. So again, they're getting that little boost from the Seattle guys. I should say at this point, I'm not big on what happened to music in the early 90s, as people who know me well will know. I didn't get it, and I don't really like grunge, new metal, although I hate that title grunge. I think it's really unfair on the bands, but totally appreciate the quality of the songwriting, the artistry, and I do. Alice in Chains is one of the bands from that time I do have a soft spot for. Although I don't like any one album, they've got enough tracks that I really like, they're a band I hope to catch live one day. Obviously Lane Staley's great on this, and it works really well having the three of them singing. So the next track is An Outside Writer. This was like the hit single off the album. It was a minor hit. I absolutely adore this track. It's one of my, and in actual fact, when I've finished doing this, I'm going to go and listen to it. It's written by Mutt Lang, him with Def Leppard fame. It's Will You Be There in the Morning, but it's just mainly, the thing with this is Nancy sings this. And again, I think that's a good thing. You know, there's more vulnerability to Nancy's voice. So if Anne sings it, it's more convincing. You know, Nancy singing that kind of lyric, but Anne comes in on the chorus with the harmony. It's just absolutely storming. It's storming AOR. So I like to crank this track up and just, you know, feel good. So Will You Be There in the Morning? Yeah, just a great pop hard rock track. Voodoo Doll's the next track, and Anything Is Possible. These two tracks I'm not fussed about. There's a little Reprise, Avalon Reprise, and then the album finished with Desire Walks On, which is the title track, which is really good. Again, it's that Zeppelin vibe. Couple of bonus tracks in Spanish, which are just Woman in Me, and then the other track, I can't remember. I think it's Anything Is Possible. So if you sort of take those off, there's kind of 13 tracks, but you probably could have trimmed Anything Is Possible, Voodoo Doll, and one of the little instrumentals. But I do think it's a really good record, so it's an 8 out of 10 for me. So in a weird way, I think they kind of finished that era with two of the strongest albums. You know, I'd always say Heart was like their great AOR album, but Brigade and Desire Walks On are really good. So after this, they do The Road Home, which is reworkings of classic tracks produced by John Paul Jones. And that's an important album for them because they basically rework for songs like Alone kind of acoustically, and they kind of adapt their 80s big hair stuff into their 70s sound and move forward from there. They basically lose all their established lineup, and they just have various other musicians they had for a while. And they don't make another new album till Jupiter's Darling. So they do Jupiter's Darling, and then there's another big gap, and there's Red Velvet Car, Fanatic, and I think it's Beautiful Broken. Of those, I've not heard Jupiter's Darling, I must confess. Fanatic's pretty rocking. Anne's vocals are still great. Nancy's, you know, her vocals still great, still playing great. The band sounds good. So they basically do the Kennedy Center honours for Led Zeppelin, and that gets them a lot of respect. It's an incredible version of Stairway to Heaven, showing off Anne's majesty. The Beautiful Broken album's got 5 new tracks, and then it's reworkings of songs of Passionworks, which is a bit strange. But what happens in this period, they fall out. Anne and Nancy. Anne is got a new husband. There's an incident with Nancy's family on a tour bus, a child, and Anne's new partner hits him for some reason, or some altercation. So they haven't worked together for a while. They've had a kind of cooling off period, but they're talking to each other, and I think they're going to be playing live together again. So hopefully that'll iron itself out. So I'm one of these guys. Just in summarising, I don't have the new stuff. I probably, you know, I've got copies of Red Velvet Car and Fanatic. You know, it's still worth checking out. I'm going to check out the Beautiful Broken, but you know, pretty much from 76 to 93, all those albums are worth having for me, apart from Private Audition, really. But you know, there's an argument. Well, you might as well get that and Passionworks. It's all great stuff. Cheers.